Very good, and welcome everyone to today's session. Brian Duncan and Jeff Davis are our presenters today, and we are going to be exploring smart data integration, some practical strategies for integrating external data into Power Platform and Dynamics 365. We're actually going to also take a look at different ways to bring in external data into a call center pop screen as well. So integrations have been historically complex and costly to create, but much has changed in that arena. And we've got Brian and Jeff here today to walk us through some smart integration strategies. So we do aim to provide a digital event today that respects all individuals. So we ask that everyone assist in providing a welcoming and safe environment for everyone. We do bring 3 of these topics to our customers every month. On Thursdays, if you have a topic you would like us to consider in our schedule, drop that in the chat today and I will grab that and bring that to our planning team. To minimize any distractions or potential background noise today, we're going to leverage the chat for questions during the presentation. Please go ahead, drop your questions there, and we will answer them as we present. And if there's enough time at the end, we'll unmute the lines and take some live questions as well. You will receive an email follow-up probably on Monday with the recording, the deck, and actually Brian and Jeff are packaging up some solutions today for you to work with to further your learning. So that'll all come in an email there on Monday. So with that, I'm going to hand it over now to Brian and Jeff. Thank you guys for bringing this content to our customers today and helping them maximize their value in Microsoft business applications. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Deb. And hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. And we do apologize. We understand that there was a little bit of confusion that depending upon where you got the information about this particular session, what the topic was today. So I know that there may be some people that were coming in expecting a digital contact center presentation. Well, the good news is I'm also a digital contact center guy, so I'm not going to leave you abandoned, even though today's topic is on smart data integrations. We will be talking specifically about how the smart data integrations are really helping us in the digital contact center world because of that uniformity of data experiences that we really need to be able to implement. So my name is Brian Duncan. I am the Microsoft Solution Engineer for New York City, and Virginia. And Jeff, did you want to say hi to everybody?
Hey everyone, I'm Jeff Davis, Solution Engineer, aligned with 6 states in the South mainly. So
excellent. And so we're going to have a little bit of fun today. We're going to do a little bit of discussion about data integrations, and then we're going to do a live presentation where we're going to actually create these data integrations right in front of you to show you exactly how the components work, how the services work inside the platform, and how easy it is to not only access external data, but integrate with external APIs or move data back and forth between our systems. That's really the power of the platform. So let's begin by talking about what our data smart integration discussion is going to be about today. So traditionally, we have a whole bunch of methodologies for which we have access to data, and we have a little bit of a story to tell about in days of old, so to speak. So Jeff, your background in custom development, you've done a lot of development with a lot of different systems, right? And historically, what ends up being the most complicated portion of any type of implementation, regardless of the technology that's being used?
yeah, just integration with systems and migration of data from other systems as well. So it's kind of just interactivity, one way, two way, whatever, right? So
exactly. And in the past, what we had is traditional custom development, right? And this image here that you see on the side, it represents on the left-hand side, we usually go through the smorgasbord of data collections or data sources. And we say, well, let's choose our data source. So we're building a new application. We choose our SQL Server or Oracle, or maybe we have a mainframe we already have to use, or a myriad of other databases. And then we usually chose our business logic tier. What are we going to build on? Are we going to build on Java? Are we going to build on .NET? And then we chose our interface layer. Are we going to make these web-based applications? Are they going to be mobile apps? Are they going to be fat client apps? And that really gauged our architecture and our approach. And because we have that business logic layer, that weaponry in the center, we kind of knew exactly how we were going to address all the data integrations that we were going to implement. Well, over the years, over the past several decades, with custom development, we've built multitude of systems, multitude of applications, and we've had a a myriad of technologies come out trying to make our life a little bit faster, a little bit easier. And we've created inadvertently something that I like to call the data monster. So what is the data monster? Well, the data monster is the most feared creature of all low-code, no-code development platforms, traditional ones, at least, like I should say. So the data monster is chaos of organized data, right? The data monster is what really kills our productivity, and it really prevents us from very rapidly responding to a lot of requests, because we have to figure out how are we bringing all this data together, how are we putting it together in a cohesive manner, and delivering it into the solutions. So on average, Jeff, out of the dozens of applications that you may have built over the past couple of years or assisted with, how many applications do you know only dealt with one singular data source?
None, probably. So
that's usually the case, especially in government. We've got a whole bunch of technical data. Well, we're going to tell a little bit more about this story. Let's talk about taming the data monster. So over the years, we've got our warriors, our custom developer warriors, and they brought to the table swords of .NET, swords of Java, and they've been able to tame the data monster. They've been able to put that net over his head and keep him at bay, so to speak. But it's an army of developers, if you notice, that's actually keeping him at the top of, what is that? A large foundation of technical debt. Because as we're bringing all these data sources in and we're working with all these data components, we're really relying upon that army to ensure that their knowledge of APIs, their knowledge of the data sources is bringing those experiences into the foreground. And that adds additional moat of complexity surrounding that technical debt. We're not going to be the people who can just pick up on day one and be able to start figuring out how somebody from like 2-3 years ago developed the application. At least, Jeff, you probably can, I can, from being custom developers, and other custom developers can. But the average problem solver is probably not going to just simply open up a .NET solution and be able to jump over that mode of complexity. You agree?
Yeah, and I think it also introduces more points of failure too along the way when you start doing this as well. And anytime I open code, I got to go back and figure out what you were trying to do and that kind of thing. And you don't understand the whole picture at the time. So
exactly. And you and I today are going to try to figure out what each other's saying during the presentation and figure out where each other's going. We're just kind of like snowballing this presentation today, and we can kind of figure out because we know each other. Now imagine if we've been separated for 2 or 3 years and we come in and we have to try to have a communication together. We'd be like, oh, I don't know who this guy is. It's the same thing with developers. If I'm coming in after 2 years after somebody's been doing something, I'm not going to pick right up where they left off. So enter the traditional CRM. So I'm going to tell you a story about this golden land of happy CRMs. And many, many years ago, the concept of CRM was introduced to the world. The idea was we're going to focus on that complexity and that technical debt. And the happy CRM cloud was created. And as you can see, we've got our developers have put down some of their swords. Yeah, we still got a little Java. We still got a lot of little .NET. But that CRM sits happily on top of its proprietary database. And we reduced that technical debt foundation, and that river of complexity has really kind of gone away. But I want to point out that if you look in the background, lurking into the clouds is still that data monster, because CRMs were very good at being able to build applications, just so long as you built applications the way CRMs really liked you to build them, right? And what was the primary decision point when you said, yo, this will work great in the CRM? It's when all the data can be where? Inside the CRM.
Yep.
Exactly. So CRMs were great. They provided a lot of capabilities, but that data monster was still lurking in the background. And sure enough, when it attacks, and CRMs kind of just fell down. And that's where complexity came in. So over the years, and I know that, Jeff, you primarily focus on the Power Platform now, but your experience spans the breadth of not only Power Platform, but Dynamics. Historically, many, many years ago, when did people, what was usually the deciding point as to when people said, you know what, this isn't going to work inside of our CRM?
Really, for me, it was always how easy I could get to the data, right? Or, and sometimes there's blockers there. So people would do workarounds, and now you'd have another siloed database, right? And so.
Exactly. And so figuring out how to bring those components in was a challenge, because traditionally CRMs had complex interfaces, or they had interfaces that suited a particular need, and they didn't necessarily suit the complexity that was necessary to interact with multiple data sources at the same time and make it seamless for the customer. So as the data monster starts to attack the CRM, it falls down a little bit, and it adds a lot more complexity to our systems because CRMs weren't traditionally designed to actually step in and solve for multiple data solutions unless you were willing to move your data into that proprietary database. And sometimes that's just not feasible. So traditional CRM development had all of its challenges, right? It does work very well as long as you have forms, apps, and processes that are communicating directly to the CRM. It all plugs in very nicely on top of its database. But this little wall right here was a barrier between the custom external data, whether it was SQL Server, Oracle, third-party APIs. There was a little bit of a barrier to play, so to speak. And that made it such that CRMs really did not suit the need for a lot of customers for a long period of time when the application use case sat in a particular category. Well, how did we address that? So Jeff, this icon look familiar? Remember this one?
Yeah. Way back to
CRM.
version 1. So, yeah.
So Jeff, quick question. Do we have a product called Microsoft Dynamics CRM anymore?
No.
We do not. And you know why?
Well, for me, it became XRM at first, right? Now, and then it's a Power Platform and Dynamics, so yeah, it's going to transition
Exactly.
and evolve to build it for anything, right? So
exactly. All those complexities that we've been talking about, they really hindered traditional CRM development. So the first thing that Microsoft did, and as an aside, Satya Nadella, our current CEO, when he came and took over this role of CEO for the company, he actually his background was in the Microsoft CRM platform. He actually cut his teeth in that platform and was instrumental in making sure that it advanced as far as it did. And also he recognized the value of what it did very, very well. But he also recognized not only what Microsoft Dynamics CRM didn't have in its toolbox, he insisted that the company goes out and research what CRMs fell down for in general. And so what we did, first of all, is we rebranded the product. We brought it in line with our overall naming convention of Dynamics 365. But very importantly, that term CRM, while CRM isn't gone from the system, the core of the system still has CRM. We've rebranded the platform to Dynamics 365. And that gets rid of those negative connotations because we still have products called CRM everywhere in the world. But those CRMs still usually suffer from a lot of the same scenarios, which is very rigid interfaces, very complex data integrations, not a really great way to interact with external data. The custom interfaces were really difficult or more complex to create than even if we were doing a traditional custom app. But then what we did is we did something that was pretty brilliant. We took and we lifted up Dynamics 365 as it was, and we said, how can we solve for the weaknesses that CRMs traditionally have? And here's what we did. We placed it on top of an entire new capability. And this is Dynamics 365 on top of the Power Platform. The Power Platform brought to the table all the features that we needed to ensure that all of our custom data integrations really became much more simplified, right? We brought in Power BI for reporting, Power Apps for not only extending our interface capabilities, but also for being able to interact with custom data sources directly. So no longer is it the case that you have to build on top of a proprietary quote unquote CRM database. You can actually connect now directly to your data source that you're building the app due to the Power Apps platform. We brought in Power Automate to create that workflow and automation capability that spans the breadth of technologies and data. Copilot Studio is our new player to the game, which was specifically designed to bring that agentification process into the platform. And then Power Pages for extending our use cases beyond the borders of our tenancy, right? So if we need to interact with our general public, if we need to interact with a large population of affiliates, or even if we have an application that really is suited better to serve to our employees as a portal-based solution rather than custom apps, we have that capability. And all those tools bring to the table a new capability for user interfaces, a new capability for adding logic to the systems, and the ability to leverage multiple data models and interact with those capabilities. Jeff, being on the Power Platform side primarily, how frequently would you say that the Power Platform is containing the tools that you're using to access the data that your customers need to interact with?
For me, it's been 100% lately. I mean, as things grow, the number of connectors out there is what's really changing. And then obviously the idea that I can do a custom connector and connect to my existing APIs, and we have the ability to access on-premise data models as well. So it pretty much can connect anything I've seen recently. So
Exactly. And so now step forward, here comes the Power Platform Hero. Power Platform Hero has jumped in front of the happy CRM, making the happy CRM happy once again. And it's got a diverse group of tools here, including the Dataverse. And yes, because these are crayon drawings, you will see that they are misspelled as well. And I thought that was just adding a little bit of cuteness to it. We bring the Dataverse and virtual table capability. We're going to talk about virtual tables today. We're going to create some on the fly and show how they work. We're going to talk about the Power Platform connectors. Those are the connectors you were just talking about, right? You probably leverage dozens of connectors in every system at this point.
Exactly.
Yep. The data flows, or the data flows as we call them. We're going to talk about data flows for moving data back and forth and out of the system. Custom connectors for those times where you reach a technology that either you've already built, you've built yourself, you've got your own API, or you got an API that we don't have a connector for. The custom connectors step up and take over there. Then we have custom pages and embedded Canvas components. And we're going to show some really creative ways that you can bring external data into your traditional call center or model-driven app experience inside of the Dataverse without having to resort to a full custom page and still being able to leverage the out-of-box goodness that the Dynamics platform brings to the table. So between these three approaches, data import and export, live data connectivity, external API integration, we've brought to the table virtually every tool necessary to tame that data monster. And so now we're going to kind of dive into them a little bit and first talk about what are some of the comparing methods and when to use which and where are the limitations. So you're going to have to make a decision when you're deciding about architecting a solution. Do I want real-time versus batch data? Real-time data versus batch data is something that's really going to be on a case-by-case basis. And sometimes you're going to choose one over the other just simply because of the freshness necessity of the data that you need for the use case. But oftentimes you'll find that batch data actually makes certain things much simpler, specifically because the data itself can be refreshed on a daily or nightly basis. And bringing it into the system can actually increase the efficiency with which your developers are able to deliver. Out of the systems that you're building, how often do you see customers leveraging import processes versus real-time access, Jeff?
I think it's probably a mix. I mean, the real-time access for me, Power Automate and all that is you can do things, certain triggering events and stuff, small data sets and all. But I think the bigger project, enterprise-wide projects, typically end up with a lot of batch data and either data flows or other techniques, kind of the volume of data you need. And then SLAs a lot of times dictate it too. If I don't have the data available till 3 a.m., but it's got to be ready for my customers by 6, that'll dictate what technology. So it's really, there's a lot that goes into what tool you use. So
absolutely. I usually see too, batch data often happens when there's a boundary between you and the target data, right? So
yeah,
we get a batch file from a different organization, or we have to download a file on a weekly basis. So batch data, we often see, but we also see batch data internally. If we have a set of golden records that another system is responsible for, so we're never going to update them, but we just need to have access to them. Sometimes it's easier to synchronize that data into our system so that we can do what we want with it, since we're not going to edit it, we're not going to change it, we're not going to feed it back, rather than constantly reach out and hope that that system is there. As you mentioned earlier, it brings another point of failure if you do access it live, right?
Yep. And then the other key is always just making sure you have that one source of truth. That's the other big picture of all this, is that's what also dictates things. So
for sure. And while today we're not going to address too much of master data management, just keep in mind all of these are tools of master data management. So whatever your strategy is for that, these are the tools that you're going to pull out of the box to be able to ensure you're conforming to the requirements of your solutions and your overall data philosophy and strategy. So the other thing we have to consider is the scalability considerations. Some of these things, as we go through and talk about and demonstrate today, you have to consider how much data is going to be brought back, how much data you're working with at a time, how fast you need to have that access, and just certain limitations of the data source in and of itself. And then effort and skill levels. Some of these data implementations are going to require a little bit more configuration than the average bear, or a little bit more awareness of the platform. Some of them require coding. So we're not going to shy away from telling you, oh, you should never write code in the system. There are times when you may want to write code in the system, and we support it. And it's sometimes necessary to give you the exact user experience that you want. However, I think you're going to be pretty impressed today when we go over to the live demonstration to show exactly how much we can do just through configuration. And again, that's where we're going to talk about the trade-offs as we go through. And Jeff, as I go through and add some of these, please feel free to step in and interrupt me and tell people, hey, don't forget, Brian, when you do this, you may have to consider that this will potentially cause a single point of failure or whatnot, and we'll address those as we go.
All right.
So let's talk about some of the methodologies we're going to see today. Data import and batch integration. This is great when slow and steady wins the race. And in general, we're going to talk today about data flows. I'm actually going to show data flow capabilities. Data flows are built into our platform, and they are an ETL process that allows you to connect to virtually any data source and import data into our proprietary data source, which we call the Dataverse, which I'm sure many of you are already familiar with. So we're going to be talking about how data flows work, not only from bringing data from one environment to the next, but from virtually any on-premise data source or cloud-based data source. We will be talking about on-premise data. In fact, today I will be using an on-premise data gateway to show a live connection to a SQL server and an Oracle database that's on my laptop. And the technology that's implemented there, how easy it is to roll out, I think is very important with that as well. However, keep in mind, data flows are only one way. We only bring data into our system for now. And so because we only bring data into our system, we have to, unfortunately, have other methods for moving data external to our system. So other data import alternatives, so you don't have to use data flows to even bring things in. You could use SSIS. A lot of people use like SQL Server integration services. There's other ETL tools out there. Jeff, what's one of the primary tools that you use all the time?
I used Azure Data Factory and pipelines mainly when I had high volume scenarios. And with SSIS, you got also, there's add-ons there, right? Like Cozy Rock and stuff out there that have the connector built in.
Right. Kingsway Soft,
Kingsway
is one of
Soft,
the
yeah.
primary connectors as well. And as far as external tools that aren't Microsoft,
well, I've historically used Scribe forever in my delivery world. So, and then I think there's TIBCO out there as well, another one that you can use. So,
yeah, absolutely. So there is a myriad of tools that you can leverage, whatever you're familiar with. Just know that they also integrate with the Power Platform. We can also use Power Automate workflows. So Power Automate gives you the ability to basically connect to any data source and move data to that data source. There are some considerations to keep in mind. Power Automate monitors the API executions. So if you're going to be moving thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of records, you may want to consider what the need is and whether or not Power Automate is the appropriate method from a licensing perspective. Yeah. And of course, Azure Synapse, which gives us that synchronization capability from our Dataverse to say, hey, whatever's happening here, put it up into the cloud, and now we give you full access to that data, just as though you had your own external SQL server, and then you can do whatever you want with that data from an ETL process or from an automation process and leveraging some of the Azure data tools as well. For live data connectivity, this is where we really turn the corner and where CRM disappeared from our label, because traditionally, if somebody said, hey, we need to extend an application and we've got data that's been built in Oracle, we're not getting rid of this Oracle database because it's too intertwined, but we really want to have faster, easier ways to build mobile applications on top of it. We're not going to use a CRM. Well, that's not true. You can technically use our CRM platform now because you don't necessarily use the quote unquote Dynamics data tables. You can use the connector library. So we have several different ways to do this. So from live data connectivity, if you're using the Dataverse, we can actually connect to that table live, leave that data in its data source, and create something called a virtual table that acts as though it's in our dynamic system, or it acts as it's in our though it's in our Dataverse, giving us full CRUD capabilities and giving us a very seamless and uniform experience across the data stores. The user doesn't even know where that data resides, and today we're going to create a couple of custom virtual tables as well. The Power Platform Connector Library, which we talked about, I think there's over about 2,000 or something now, Jeff?
Yeah,
something like that.
Like it changes daily, but yeah, that's the number I go with, yeah.
These data connectors, they're basically the democratization of custom developed code. So instead of having to know how to use an API or how to connect to a data source, you basically have a connector that walks you through a wizard for connecting to it and says, great, now I have connectivity. I would like to bring this data in. And you can do that, and you can interact with all the primary functions and methods. If it's a custom API, it brings those API components in as well. So you can basically create calls to them just through our normal configuration of the system without knowing how to write the code. The on-premise data gateway is something we're going to talk about. I have one installed today already on my desktop. I'm not going to reinstall the on-premise data gateway, but I will talk about the install. It's a very easy process, and our system does walk you through that as well. And then we're going to talk about something that I did one of the tech series not too long ago, and I did a presentation about a solution we built from the portals where we were leveraging AI to inspect apartments that people were submitting for heavy-duty cleaning. And in that, I showed how the back-end system was showing data from a SQL Server database in a different type of interface. And people were surprised that I had this component that was embedded into a traditional form that looked like a Canvas app. And that was an embedded Canvas component. And we're going to be doing some of those today and showing you how you can take a piece of Canvas and you can embed it into any of your model-driven app forms. That piece of Canvas can bring as many connectors in as you want, surfacing external data components. And it brings an object that we're going to talk about called model-driven form integration object. It's not an object that's normally not in a Canvas app, but we're going to show how that comes in. It grants you access to link the data that's in your Dataverse or dynamic system directly to those external data sources. And for those of you that are here today that thought that you were getting a digital contact center presentation, just know that all the digital contact centers that I've worked with, I've mentioned this particular technique, and almost all of them have implemented it, where maybe somebody calls on a phone line that's recognized. So as soon as Brian Duncan's phone number gets forwarded off to an agent, the screen pops up and says, "Hey, Brian Duncan, I see all your customer information that's in our case management system, but at the same time, a piece of Canvas has made a live connection to an Oracle database system, or maybe even a SharePoint on-premise system, or maybe it's made us to DB2 or SQL Server, whatever it's done. It's made a connection to those APIs and it's presenting that external data directly in that Canvas component seamlessly and linking it to Brian Duncan. So without having to leave my contact center and go into my claims system or go into my other case systems or my finance systems, I can see all the data bubbled up that digital contact center agent needs to make the decisions that they need to move forward. And that's an extremely powerful component. There's also something called a custom page. They've been around for a couple of years now, where custom pages now give you pixel perfect design control over a form that's in the model-driven app. So there's no limitation to what your model-driven app form can look like. And Jeff, in general, what is the primary downside of building a custom page inside of a model-driven app?
The primary downside of it, you talking about it traditional or now? That's it.
Just if you had to choose between building a form in a model-driven app, which is pretty much right there, ready to go, and building a custom page, the primary difference is what?
There's code.
Yeah, but there's
look and feel is also a thing.
Exactly. There's the Canvas apps components, and it takes a little bit longer because we're putting it into the hands of the person to actually take control of that. So embedded Canvas apps, we're going to show you how they work and how we can bring content into your forms regardless of where you want them. And then also we're going to talk about external APIs and calling external data through API integration. There's several ways to do this. One of them, which I think is not leveraged enough, I've done a couple tech series. I think did one with Tim Hanowich. We did a presentation on the on-premise data gateway and custom connectors, where we created a custom connector for some custom code that we had put in an Azure data service. You can create an API for yourselves. Maybe you have web services that you've been leveraging in your custom code for years. There's no reason you can't create a custom connector that embodies all the capabilities of those APIs and share that out to your dev teams. And now, whenever they need to interact with any of those services, instead of having to understand the API and make direct calls to the code, they can incorporate that custom connector into their Canvas apps, into their model-driven apps, into their Power Automate flows. And using that connector, they can interact with that data service seamlessly and get those functions taken care of. We also have PCF controls. PCF controls are going to be code that you write inside of Visual Studio or whatnot, and you're going to compile them as a PCF control. Within that PCF control, you'll be able to install that control inside of one of your applications, and you leverage it to do very advanced things. And because you can create TypeScript code and so forth, it can look like anything, and it can have access to virtually any data that's in there. Today, I'm going to show a PCF control that connects to Google Maps to do an address verification. And then extending functionalities of code in general. As you know, we have plugins. We did a session not too long ago on how to create custom plugins. Custom plugins also open up the world of our platform to your coders to be able to develop and access virtually any type of data sources through the plugins within the scope of permission capability that they can execute inside of a plugin. So that is always there. And although we won't be writing any plugins today, there are sessions already available that we can share that we've done in the past. So those custom pages that we talked about, we're going to talk about some of the limitations that are on those. We are going to be showing how to create a custom page and how it provides that tool set that's up there. But the nice thing is it supports the full drag and drop pixel perfect design editor that is in the Canvas page, but it brings it into your call center, it brings it into your model driven app, and does give you that ability to bring the full library of custom connectors or Power Platform connectors into your application. And then again, the custom code methods and capabilities that we'll be addressing today. So we're going to come back to here. I'm going to stop sharing our content, and we are going to switch over to share our screen, and we're going to talk about our different data integrations. All right. So Jeff, you can see my screen, right?
No, you got to check the box. Yeah, I just turned
there
it
it goes.
Yep.
There it goes. Thank you, sir. All right. So I am logged into the Power Platform. Now, as an aside, I have already gone through and I've gone into my gateways, and I said I would like to create a new gateway. And on doing that, when I say new gateway, it brings me to this website and it says, great, just download this particular executable. Here's the executable coming down. I am not going to install it because I don't need it. I've already installed it. And upon doing that, the on-premise data gateway is installed on my machine. And it fires off, and it allows me to very quickly configure a connection to a cloud resource. So this is already running on my machine. As you can see, the gateway is all set up and running in. And you do sign in with a service account or an account that you've granted permissions to so that it can connect to our cloud-based environment. And in general, what the on-premise data gateway does is it connects our cloud platform to your network. It makes your network data sources available to us. It still enforces all the permissions. It does not punch open a whole bunch of firewalls. And no, we are not making a live connection to any of the actual data sources from our cloud. Instead, the on-premise data gateway usually operates on a server. It is the one that actually makes the live connection to your data sources and that feeds the data into the cloud. There is no connectivity coming through your firewall. We are not making a live connection from our cloud into your data store. The connection is done on the gateway machine and fed into the cloud through a service bus nature. We do have a presentation on that, but that's how I'm going to be interacting today. And on this particular system, I have brought with me a SQL Server database. And here's my SQL Server database. And as you can see, I've got a couple of records in here from Doug Fernie and Doug Bernard. And these are cohorts of ours. You've probably seen them present many times on this tech series themselves. And I'm going to be making fun of them today, as is Jeff. We'll have fun with that as well. So we're going to come back to see this as we're going to interact with this data. And so first, let's say that I want to create a remote table. Well, it's pretty easy inside of our solution. So I've created a solution here, and I'm going to go into this remote data demo. And let's say I want to connect that investigations table. Now, if you look here, I already have one called investigations, but let's do it again. And I'm going to say, let's create a new table, virtual table. Now, before I do that, I want to drop right back out to our library here, because this connections section inside of Power Apps is really where everything begins. Inside of every environment of Power Platform, this is where we control what data sources we have access to in the environment we're developing on. And as we mentioned, one of the primary things that was brought into the platform from that whole re-innovation or the reinvention of the Power Platform in Dynamics 365 back in the day was this concept of the connector library. So let's say somebody says, I have an Oracle database. Well, there's my Oracle database connector. Let's say they have a SQL Server. There's my SQL Server connector. Let's say they have Salesforce. We have a Salesforce connector, and we can connect to and interact and build apps on top of Salesforce. So let's actually make a connection to show you what it takes to make a connection to my SQL Server. So I'm going to say, let's add a SQL Server connection. And immediately, based upon the connector I've chosen, it is reaching out and it's bringing in, based upon its understanding of the API, all the things that are needed to authenticate in. So I'm going to just use SQL Server authentication because that's what I've set up on my machine. I'm going to go over to my machine here and just look at my SQL Server and say, hey, let me just check the name of this. And I think it's something laptop. So once I have the name of the database, so if that's the name of the database, I need the name of the actual server. So here it is, and the name is laptop v9, blah, 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 blah. I'm going to come back to my Power Platform, and I'm going to say the server name is going to be laptop v92. The SQL database name I'm connecting to is HHS. The username, and don't judge, I'm using the SA password. Yes, I know, you're not supposed to use the SA password. And here it recognizes that I may want to choose a gateway. Now I have an Azure SQL connector. I can connect directly to a cloud service. And because I have this jobs portal GCC connector already installed on my machine, I'm going to create this connection. It's now going to, through our service bus in the cloud, generate a connector, make a request of the SQL Server that is through the gateway that's installed, and install that connection right here on top of here. And so now I can go up here and I can say display name is HHH laptop. I'm going to say new connection to SQL. And I do have to put in my credentials again in order to save this. And voila, I now have new connection to SQL. I have a connection now that I can share out to any of the developers. Now, what's nice about this, the way our connector library works, is if I'm a DBA or an administrator, I can put into the hands of the DBAs the requirement to create all the approved connections from a dev, test, QA, production perspective. Think about what you do right now when you're developing. I can guarantee you that any of the developers that are listening right now probably know the username and password of some database that they're developing on. And traditionally, that's what we do. We hand out a development username and password. But think about how much more secure this is when we can put it into the hands of the DBA, that the DBA can log in with the the credentials that they know and they manage, and not have to share the credentials out, create the connection, and instead share that connector out to the developers who can now bring it as a user into their development team so that now they can develop on top of it. That's a very powerful bit of security, by the way, that kind of goes overlooked. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in, instead of just simply, I'm going to go back into my solution, go into my tables and say, let's add a new virtual table. And now let's take a peek at this nice little wizard that's just popped up. It's gone out and it's brought a number of connections into the system. I caught myself there. So it's got SQL Server, it's got SharePoint, it's got Salesforce, and I can bring in additional connections, including Oracle and so forth. I'm going to bring in SQL Server, and I'm going to use this new connection that I've already created here because I know it's working. It's going to make a live connection, and look at that. There's this investigations table on my system. I'm going to choose that investigations table, and I'm even going to tell it generate the columns for me. And it's going to go out, it's going to look at all the data that's in that system. It's going to say, okay, I've got an investigations table, and I'm going to call it investigations. Now I'm going to change the name of this. I'm going to call this live investigations, and you'll see why. And I'm going to go through, I get to see all the names of the fields that it's bringing in, and I can just accept whatever values they are. I see the live investigations table. I'm going to say finish. And it's now going to generate a virtual data table that has a live connection out to that SQL Server database with all the appropriate fields that I've told it to bring in, with any naming conventions that I also want to bring in. I didn't do that here, but let's say it did. And now I have that live connection. Now it's going to take a minute to do that. I've already created a connection. That's why I've created this investigations thing. Let's run this application. And let's see my traditional investigations virtual table to see how that works. So if you notice, this is just my remote data source model-driven app. And on the left-hand side, I have several different tables that are being shown, including this investigations table. And if we look at it, let's see, we have 3 records. We have Fernie, Bernard, Fernie. Let's go back and look at my SQL Server. Here it is, Fernie, Bernard, Fernie, 3 records. All right, well, let's see. Let's prove that it's actually still connected. Let's go through and let's create a new record. And I'm going to say John Smith. Oops. And as you can tell, I just simply drag and drop these forms really quickly. Investigation type, initial, customer number. Customer number is what I'm going to use to link this external data source to my system. So this system, let's say it had a customer number field that identifies who this person is. All I need to do inside of my call center or inside of my Dynamics or Dataverse is create a field that I can link to. It doesn't have to be a text field. It can be virtually anything. I'm going to connect this to the 54321 customer number, which I believe is Doug Bernard. And I'm going to choose a date of investigation. I'm going to choose a date investigation. I'm going to say initial inspection 1, past inspection 1, secondary inspection 1. Status is active. And the findings, no findings as of yet. If I hit save and close, I should seamlessly have no difference between this record being saved into that SQL Server, which is now going through our Power Platform data service, coming down, telling the on-premise data gateway that's behind my internal firewall in my room here, into the SQL Server that's running on my machine and updating that record. And if that worked appropriately, I should be able to go back here. I should be able to run this particular query one more time. And I should see, there we go, 4 new records. So now I have a direct connection to SQL Server. But the best part is I can now interact with this in any way that I see fit. I can treat it just like it's data in my SQL Server. So let's do that. Let's go over to my solution now, which is here. Let's go into my contact form, and I'm going to go into the information form. And I'm going to do two things here. I'm going to show how we can bring that data in. And you know what else I'm going to do? I'm going to create another virtual data table here in a minute where I'm going to connect to a SharePoint service. So let's go and create a new 2-column tab. I'm going to call this external data. And now, if I want to, I can actually create a relationship to this, but I'm just going to put let's call it a grid, let's call it a subgrid. And I'm going to bring a subgrid of investigations. Now notice I can't create a relationship. I can't say bring me in the related records because I haven't created a relationship, but I can indeed do that. I'm just going to bring it in so you can see that when I look at these, I can see all the investigations. And to do INB. I think I called them something else. I called them something else investigations, but I can add the subgrid there. While I'm doing that, I'm going to go out and add the virtual SharePoint table. Add virtual table. Let's do a SharePoint connection this time. And this is done quite frequently where people have created a SharePoint site with multiple lists and they don't want to have that data in SharePoint anymore. The great way to do this is just create a virtual table, expose this particular solution, allow this to make the connection. I'm going to bring in the job applications component. And once again, it's going to go through, I'm going to call this live SharePoint job applications. It's going to go through, bring in all the data that we want. And once again, generate that virtual table. Here, I've already created the SharePoint job applications table, which is the one that was created beforehand. And if I go through and I create a new record, I have a title, I have a city, I have a company, a customer number, a deadline, job type, remote or on-site, a role, and does it support relocation. And if I save this, it too will save into my SharePoint site. And I think I did one thing wrong on that particular thing. I know what I think is I changed my solution. That's all right. Let's go show our SharePoint directory. And inside of here, I went to my jobs portal and my job applications list. And sure enough, there are my job applications, including the record that I just added. The reason it's throwing an error is because I had changed this particular record since I did that remote table earlier today, but I wanted to make sure that it was available in there. So no biggie there. But now that we've created those tables, I can go back in here and I can see I have live job applications and I have live investigations. And all I need to do now is go through and do the traditional configuration that I want. I can go through say add particular fields. It already brought most of them in for me. I can go into the SharePoint job applications and I can change the views here and say, here are all the values that I want on my my virtual table. And so I get full control over those data sources as though they are part of Dynamics 365. Now, this is great, but let's say we can't make a virtual table. We don't have a direct connection to SQL Server. We don't have a direct connection to SharePoint. Or let's say we just have a different need for bringing data in. We don't really want to bring it in traditionally. We want somebody to be able to see our on-premise data separate from our cloud-based data. Well, let's talk about that additional capability, including bringing in data through either an embedded Canvas app or something like a custom page. I'm going to go into our contact table. I'm going to go into our form, and I'm going to open the information form. we had this opened up earlier. And I'm going to add a 2-column tab. And I'm going to call this external data. And now I'm going to go out and take a form field. And I'm going to let's search that customer number, for instance. So I have a customer number field that's on my Dataverse. Now, what I'd like to do is I'd like to create a piece of canvas that leverages our custom connector library to connect to any data source. And when I view my Dataverse data, I want to see that data source there. So no problem. I'm just going to add a particular field here. And you can do this through this particular interface. However, I'm going to show you a quick little shortcut. And it seems like it's not a shortcut, but trust me, it is. So here, I want to now change this customer number field. You do have to start with a field to a piece of Canvas component or an embedded Canvas. This Canvas is going to make a live connection to either an external API or to a remote data service. And I can do that by adding a component here. And one of the components I can add is a Canvas app. But here's a much better way to do it. We still have this classic editor built into our system. I'm going to open this form in this classic editor. And I'm going to show you how you can very quickly generate a piece of Canvas that's already connected to all of the things that you want it to, bring it into your data service, and be able to start leveraging it. And this is a great way to, as I mentioned, for a digital contact center, if somebody calls in and you need to pop up external data that's on an API or external data that's in Oracle or SQL Server, and you also want to perhaps give them the ability to edit that data, this gives you that ability to embed that piece of functionality into just one section of the form, which is what I'm going to do here. So this particular form, they take about a minute or so to launch when they first open up. And the other option that you have for adding Canvas to the page system is something called a custom page. So if you create a custom page, let's call this new data connections live. This too gives you the ability to leverage those same tools that are in our Canvas app designer, including the connector library to bring data in. And so now I'm going to go back, and we'll come back to this in a minute. While that particular form is opened up, let's go down and find that field that I just created. So inside of the section, I thought I put a section in here. I must not have saved it before I switched over. That's all right. So inside of the, here's it is external
That's that
data.
customer number right there, yeah.
So now I'm just going to double click on the field. I'm going to go into controls, add a control. Give it a second, it just takes a second. There we go. Add a control, go to Canvas, add it, choose to show it on all versions of the form, choose to hide the actual control itself, and then choose Customize. What this is going to do is it's going to generate a stub of an application. And this stub has all the connectivity that I need to be able to bring in all the connectors and link it to the data that's on my form. So right now I'm on a contact form, and on my contact has a field called customer number. And I'm using that customer number to bridge the gap between my on-cloud data, my Dataverse data, and whatever data sources I bring in that also share that common customer number, that unique ID, so to speak, that we all share across multiple systems. By the way, you can have multiple versions of that depending upon the data source. You just have to make sure that we have a way to link them into the system. And it's brought this in. Now I'm just going to delete what this brought up. I'm going to say delete this, delete that, and delete this. And I'm going to now just insert a vertical gallery. And I'm going to expand it a little bit, bring it down, and I'm going to switch it to a traditional gallery. And in the data source, I'm now going to go to my data source. I'm going to say add data. I'm going to say SQL Server. Notice I am not bringing in the remote, the virtual table. I'm bringing in the SQL Server connection. I'm going to use the SQL Server connection. It's going to reach out to my database that's on my machine, ask me which tables I want to connect to. I'm going to say investigations again. It's going to connect live, make that data source part of my system. I'm going to now go choose which fields I want. I'm going to first set the items to filter. And now I have an investigations data source. I'm going to say filter the investigations. And I'm going to filter it by customer number equals, and now I'm going to type in something data, model. See this model-driven form integration object? That's why I went through and generated the Canvas app through that additional tool. It already brought in all the objects I need. That model-driven form integration has the concept of the item that is on display on the form that this particular canvas is embedded in, and all the data that's on it, including the customer number that's in my Dataverse. So now I'm saying just filter all of the investigations where the customer number matches the customer number. And now I just need to go through and choose which fields I want to show. In this case, I'm going to show the last name. I'm going to show the date of investigation, and I'm going to show the findings. And I probably should have done that separately, but that looks good for now. And if I want to, I can even add an additional screen and a button that will toggle the screens to say, now show me those applications, for instance. So let's go and insert a button. And we'll call this applications. And when we click on it, we're going to just say navigate to form screen 2 or screen 1. And we're going to do it with a cover transition. And then here, copy this, paste it here. That's going to go there, and then this one's going to go back to form screen. And we're going to change the name to this to investigations. And now the gallery here, I'm just going to connect a new data source. Let's do SharePoint. Once again, it's going to ask us for what particular website. I'm going to go down and choose the job applications list. I now have that data source, and I can change this to be filter job applications where customer number is equal to customer number. So same exact type of thing, but now this time when I switch the title, I want to map the field to, let's call it the company. One little bug there. I can now save this, call this embed canvas app, hit save, and of course I have the full control. I can change the form size, I can change the component size, I can do everything that I need to ensure that I'm getting the user experience that I want. And once this is saved, I'm going to publish it. This is going to publish the version. I'm going to go back to the form. I already do have hide display control. I also want to not display the label on the form. Hit OK, hit save, and hit publish. Now this particular form has a piece of canvas in it that if I go back to my application and run, I should be able to go to contacts now and refresh. If I go into Doug Fernie, I should be able to go to external data. It's going to connect and say pending investigation, no findings as yet. If I hit job applications, freelance, full-time, it's going to show all the things that are linked to just that particular user. If I switch over, actually, this is not the form. This is the one I created earlier. We have a different one. This is the information form. This should now be the one we just created. So the very first time I run it, it's going to ask for some permissions. I'm going to allow it, but this should work just the same. There we go. It's showing live SQL, live SharePoint, and these are not leveraging virtual tables. These are live actual connections onto the system. The last thing I will talk about, I know we have a couple things that we put on our list. Hopefully, you've seen some interesting things with our connector library, our virtual tables, and also our embedded canvas and custom pages. But we also created a data flow where if you'd like to, you can just simply create a process where you connect to your data store. In this case, I connected directly to our SharePoint list. Once I went through there, I mapped all of the fields I told it to generate a matching table, or I could have matched it to an existing table. And then all we do is we choose to map to run it and map it. Now, if I go back to my app, I have something called imported job applications. This is only showing one job application, but as you know, we have more than that in the system. If I go through now and I run the data flow, which can be scheduled and it can be executed at different times, will now go out, it'll connect to that additional data and bring it into the system. I hope you've seen a lot today. I know we're down to the last few minutes. I hope you've seen a lot of things that help you understand exactly how flexible and easy it is to not only interact with external data, but all the myriad of opportunities you have to bring it into the system. We didn't get a chance to write custom code today for like something like a PCF control, but that was not going to be the intent today just due to the time that we had. But I did want to show some of these more usual methods and more creative methods of bringing external data in through the myriad of tools that are available. So with that, I know we're down to the last few minutes. We can open up the microphones if there's any questions. Jeff, anything that was lingering from the